ordinance change. Pressure irrigation.
Okay, welcome to the Kaysville City Planning Commission meeting for Thursday, April 11, 2019. Our first order of business is approval of the minutes for the March 28 meeting.
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes from the March 28 planning meeting.
Second.
Aye.
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 Great. Number 2A, conditional use permit for major home 469 Carriage Lane for Blake Walker.
So I'll just do a brief introduction, if I may, Mr. Chair. We've got a new staff member here, Dan Jessup. He's not new with Kaysville City, but he's new helping us out in community development. So he'll introduce these items to you, but just to help you put a face to a name and know who you're talking to, or welcome him on board with our staff.
Welcome. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. What we have first is woodworking, major home occupation B. He wants to start up. He lives in a subdivision right there. The address is 469 North Carriage Lane. It's just off of 2nd North, halfway down between the freeway, I guess, and Angel Street. He has a business where he wants to make woodworking in the shop behind his house there. He's delivered materials 6 to 8 weeks as needed. He delivers his goods on a 14th. We'll do all his woodwork and sand and everything, paint and lacquering inside there. His products go out unpainted though, so there'll be no smells or any problems with the neighbors. Let's see what else I discuss with him. I got this, don't worry. All right. I went through everything with him. I recommend that we allow him to do his home occupation without any conditionals or conditions.
Any comments or questions from the commission? Is the applicant here? Okay.
Is there room in the shop? Do you want to come to the...
Why don't you come up and state your name and we'll ask some questions.
It indicates in here... Oh, go ahead. State your name.
Sure. Blake Walker, and I do live at 469 Carriage Lane.
Thank you. It indicates here that you have room to store all the wood materials inside the shop. There won't be any kind of exterior storage.
That's correct.
Okay. And the deliveries, it's like a... So the delivery truck, it's not a massive vehicle that's going to cause problems in the neighborhood kind of thing?
Right now I'm buying from Home Depot's pro department, so they deliver it right back into the shop with the small fork truck.
Okay. Have you had any neighbors talk to you about this, or has there been?
I've actually talked to them because I was curious, if I'm running my machines, can you hear it? Does it bug you? Hasn't been an issue.
And that's inside your workshop, right? Yeah. Okay, any other questions?
I was just wondering, do you have employees that will be working with you inside your workshop? No, just yourself?
Just me.
Okay. Okay, I'll make a motion to grant a conditional use permit for a major home occupation B woodworking for Blake Walker at 469 North Carriage Lane without conditions, right?
Sure.
I'll second that.
Go ahead, sir.
Aye.
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 Good luck.
Thank you, and thanks, Dan. Good work on your first one.
Hey, I'm scared, man.
Okay, next, a conditional use permit for major home occupation contractor roofing for Kelly Mann at 1558 Barrington Drive.
Okay, I'll try to make this go smoother. I talked to him. He down there in the bottom off of Wellington in subdivision. He's got plenty of driveway, plenty of space. He's got a 22-foot trailer. He'll always have it parked behind there if he ever stores it for his roofing business. That's probably the only piece of equipment he'll ever have at his house. He has employees, but they never show up to his residence. His trailer will always be parked behind a fence. He's got a pickup truck, and that's about his personal vehicle. That's the only thing, and it'll always be in this driveway and nothing on the street. He has no materials. He has, plenty of parking for his stuff. He has no, anybody will never probably ever know that he's running business out of this place there. There's no employees, nothing showing up, so I recommend that. He's good for his conditional permit with no additional conditions.
Great, thank you. Any questions or discussions about this item? Is the applicant here? Okay. Do you want to ask anything?
Just a quick question, if
Why
you
don't
would.
Just want me to state who I am?
Yeah.
Kelly Mann, I live at 1558 Barrington Drive.
It talks about a 20-foot trailer. Do you store product on that trailer that you park there, or just an empty trailer? Or?
It's a dump trailer, so I use it probably 90% of the time. It's usually at another, it's on site of whatever job I'm working on, and then I store it there on the weekends, or if there's a lag in between jobs.
Okay.
Have you had anyone talk to you in your neighborhood about the business or in response to this notice that they've probably seen?
No. Well, yeah, they've all asked what that is, and I
Oh.
explained to them that it was just that I've applied for.
Okay.
There's a lot of roofing going on in the area.
Yes.
But other than that.
Okay. All right, anything else? Okay, I'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion that we
Thanks, Josh.
grant a conditional use permit for a major home occupation for a contractor, a roofing contractor, at 1558 Barrington Drive, with the recommendation by staff, which is no additional conditions.
Second.
It's you, isn't it, or is it me? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Great, good work. Okay. Next is the public hearing and request to 4.7 acres of property to rezone, I think is approximately 1325 west, 200 north, from residential agricultural to general commercial for the Ogden Clinic, Green Family Trust.
All right. And I'll give a brief introduction to that, Mr. Chair. And as stated, this is a public hearing, so as you well know after my remarks, I'll just remind the commission to ensure there are probably one or two people here that would like to speak to it, and I do know the applicant is here, and provide additional information on their ambitions and hopes. So the property directly west of Flint Street, across the street from the Smith's Marketplace and the Neaters property there, you can see it's kind of a long, narrow piece that fronts 200 north, abuts against the trail to the west. There's the Kaysville Bible Church directly to the east on the corner, and then you have some residences that surround it on the south side to the east and south as well. For just a little over 4.5 acres, right now the RA zoning essentially allows for half-acre lot type residential development. The request at this location, so there's a lot of industrial, but the applicant's request is, as I've worked with them and understanding what they intend to do, the general commercial zoning district to accommodate their use. What they've brought to staff, just as a kind of a concept to give an idea to the planning commission in the city, what they're thinking about with the property. And we bumped into this on recent rezones where it's fairly detailed, but we've not completed a full site plan type review from staff level, but hopefully it gives you an idea on what it may look like on site. should they be there. So in this particular item here, you can see the building located towards the north of the property near the Bible church with parking. Just to give you an idea again of what the clinic may look like. This one is not necessarily this facility. The Ogden Clinic has others throughout the area. They can correct me on this. I believe this one is on Harrison Boulevard. So just an example of the type of architecture, materials that go with their branding and what you might expect for a building here in Kaysville City. So just another picture to go along with that for your consideration of what it may look like. Speaking with the applicants, my understanding of their use, and again, they can probably expound upon this, but much of the business is kind of a 9-to-5 type. They'd have different specialties and practices within the facility: family medicine, oncology, weight loss, GI, lab, radiology. They would also have, they believe, urgent care on this. So I talked about the 9-to-5. That likely would expand the hours potentially to about 8 p.m. on some days. 8 to 3 would be the hours on Saturday. So again, they'll speak to this. They're just still working through the details on if they can get this, what all that might look like, and what specifically makes the most sense for their operations here on this property. So for the Planning Commission's consideration, just procedurally, again, this is a rezone, which is a legislative type decision. So that gives you a discretion as to what you feel like forwarding along to the City Council, where the ultimate decision would be made. We see these again where you're looking on a case-by-case basis. How does it conform with the language of the general plan? It does sit along Major Street of 200 North, and how it works in the specific location. We've had some emails and comments come through that I believe have been forwarded to the Planning Commission that I just wanted to make note of. I think the Commission's had the chance to see and read those. Any concerns or items, should the Planning Commission be inclined to move in the direction of granting a rezone, or at least recommending approval of it? As a reminder, could be things we consider through a development area to put further restraints on the requested zone. And we could work with that in different ways, either with you or with the City Council, based on your recommendation. With that, I will pass the floor back to the chair. Be happy to take any questions or answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Are there any preliminary questions we want to ask before we start the public hearing?
I just had one question about building height. For a 3-story building, what would be the maximum height that the city allows?
So the general commercial zone has a 35-foot height limit in the zone.
Okay.
So, and that's measured in different ways, and that's applicable citywide. So whether you fixture and the ultimate stylings of the building, the general commercial zone does also have provisions that allow for additional height through a conditional use process.
Okay. So that's 35 from the ground to the tip of the roof?
So if it's a flat roof style construction, then it would be that. If it's a pitched roof, it's actually the midpoint of the roof. So,
okay.
So for example, midpoint of the roof, yeah. So if you go citywide, our residential districts are smaller, but you have a lot of pitched roofs on residences.
Okay.
They'll often exceed that based on their architecture, where halfway between the wall plate and the peak of the roof, midpoint, is where we measure our height to.
And then a 2-story house? What's the maximum height for that?
So our resident limit,
Okay.
our LI and general commercial zone have a 35-foot height limit with the ability through conditional uses to go higher.
Okay. Thanks. Just wondering.
Maybe along those same lines, it seemed like there was some confusion in some of the comments I read. The building placement is as noted on this, right? I mean, it's up against the Kaysville Bible Church, right? That's where it's...
Yes, that's the current plan. So the applicant could probably speak more detailed as just the absolute direction they're heading, but this is the concept we have before us that sits right by the church.
Since this is a rezone, we're not necessarily dictating where the building is unless we do it through a development agreement, right?
Correct. So should you feel it necessary to pick a spot and roll over very specific through a development agreement, should it be necessary?
Some of the concerns might be resolved if we make sure the building gets put in a place that's not
Next to, yeah.
There's another phased building right there.
So I suspect what they're showing on that is retention.
Oh, okay.
For their water,
Got
for the stormwater.
Okay. Well, anything else we want to clarify before we open the public hearing?
Yeah, just one question. Lyle, the only guidance I could find in the city's general plan with regard to commercial uses or business uses was that it says most sites used for business should be located on major streets. And that's it. That's pretty minimal. Anything else that I'm...
The general plan speaks about allowing a variety of uses for the city to provide amenities and services to its residents. Kaysville is primarily a bedroom or residential type community. I think it has language of that matter, but where there are businesses, as stated, they would be done along major streets and in a manner that's harmonious with surroundings. So it's, as we found in many other cases, very general. So
about as general as I've ever seen it, I think. Very minimal. Yeah, okay.
Lyle, before we open it up, could you possibly speak about the changes to Second North that are coming? Because that was one of the concerns, and it's kind of a double. It's supposed to be on a major street, but one of the concerns is the street's too busy. And can you maybe identify what's going to happen from Flint Street west over the next couple of years?
Yeah, I'll attempt to. So get out my crystal ball here, and nobody hold me to it if I'm wrong, predicting the future. But yeah, as we've been planning the road infrastructure here in the area, 200 North already is a very busy street. We've got I-15, and it's a main point of access onto one of the few interchanges we have within Kaysville City. So clearly a lot of traffic feeds that way. The shopping center, there's a new freeway that's going to be built in the very near future, the West Davis corridor on the far west end of 200 North. So we anticipate, it's a bit of guesswork. It might disperse traffic a little bit where not everybody's heading east to get onto I-15. They may head west of that other freeway. But where you've got a connection between two major spots, there would likely be an increase in traffic, not just because of that, but future growth and additional homes and so forth that are coming in the area. So the right-of-way width is wide enough to handle additional lanes if we were to restripe it, where it could be a 5-lane facility, which is 2 travel lanes in each direction and a median turn lane. At what point that may happen, ultimately we're going to let the data determine if and when that's the right move to make. So I don't know if that's a years out type move, but the curb to curb, there's enough width to make those changes.
Just a follow-up question on that. And I would guess maybe the staff doesn't quite know the answer to this, but what is at this intersection right here, Flint and 200 North, have there been any recent traffic studies done by, say, Smith's or even the city, let's say in the last 5 years? And if so, what was the level of service at just that intersection as an example?
So I believe the intersection was completed, was it 3 years ago? It's fairly recent. It's throughout the area, but a study determining the level of service, I'm not familiar with anything that's been done since the intersection's been put into place.
Okay. I think that would be interesting and quite relevant to know.
Capacity, basically?
Yeah, level of service basically says what's the grade, A, B, C, D, or F, or something like that. F is obviously failing. If it's an A, traffic's flowing nice, and it looks at like peak times. Maybe Wilf can correct me if I'm wrong. So if this is already a level of service like less than a C, and it's just going to get worse, then we might have different considerations than if.
I just have a question. I know we're not talking about the other property in green, the subdivision that's kind of outlined. Is that just another phase of that existing subdivision to the left in the corner? Yeah.
This here?
Yeah.
So what that is on our maps, and I'll zoom out a little bit. So as we do development throughout the city, and this has probably actually been updated since this was created, we plug in each development as it comes under a preliminary type approval so we can fit it into our network and understand how it's going to connect. Right. So that is the preserved subdivision that Symphony Homes did. Okay. So it's separate from this. They're probably going vertical on homes already. I think we just barely completed.
So that'll be more houses. I was just.
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so before we open the public hearing, I just want to make a few comments and reiterate what Lyle said about this being a legislative decision that's left up to the City Council. As the Planning Commission, we recommend that it get approved or not recommend that it get approved. So we're not the final body. If the decision doesn't go your way, or even if it does, you're invited to attend the City Council meeting that addresses this, and that's where the ultimate decision gets made. There have been times in the recent past where the Planning Commission voted one way and we don't really know exactly how and when that happens. So just be aware of that as you make comments here. Secondly, we'd like to limit the amount of comments we have. I'd like to keep your comments to 3 minutes. And if someone has before you already expressed those same feelings, or ideas, feel free to just echo that, and we'll take that into account. You don't need to repeat it. We've already read, as has been mentioned, in multiple emails that have been sent and reviewed. We appreciate that input as well. And if you are going to stand up and just say that I'm me and this is what I said and then sit down, we have a large crowd here, and I imagine that most of you are here for that. So please be sensitive to the time constraints, and Lyle's got a 3-minute timer going. So when you hear that, that means you got to wrap it up, and don't make us try to interrupt you. So I appreciate that. And with that, I'll open up the public hearing. If you'd like to speak, come forward, state your name, and then tell us what you think. Go ahead.
I'll start off.
Great.
My name is Jim Hyde, and I live at 855 West, 75. We've lived in this area for about 30 years, and our concern, and I did send an email,
Okay.
and our major concern is the developing it into general commercial without the infrastructure and the road and the ability to get people safely in and out. I counted the parking spaces on their submitted site plan, 356 stalls. If those only turn over 4 times in a day, that's 1,400 different visits in and out of the site, 2,800 cars up and down that road. About 20 years ago, we as a neighborhood lost a little girl right there on 200 North, and it was too busy then. The road hasn't changed since then. We've just put all that additional traffic on it. So what I would ask is that there's definitely needs to be a traffic study done as to what the impact of those ingress-egress cars are on 200 North. And if it's going to eventually be a UDOT road, I'm almost certain that they would require a deceleration lane to have that number of cars in and out. And I don't know how that works with the rail trail, but it also, it's needed because the traffic on that road right now is too excessive. The other concerns that I have are, I'm really good friends with the Smith family that has lived there for lots of street. Great residents to our community, and they have the home that's on the south end of the property. And the concern there would be the impact of looking over, from their pioneer home in that backyard, enjoying a beautiful setting and looking out and seeing parking lot, and then at night the lights come on. And what type of shrouding? I know it has to be down lights, but what type of shrouding? So when you're sitting there in your backyard of Clem's or Smith's or some of the people there on Mountain Vistas or Gavitas or Klein's or all those people that live right there, that when they're sitting in their backyards looking out at, say, the sunset, they don't all of a sudden have all the parking lot lights that are just, and they see in the bottom of those fixtures. And so what type of requirements would you require for that? So this community, and been here a long time and plan on staying, but let's make it to where it's safe for everybody.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Craig Reese, 53 North Flint Street. So I live in the development that's just directly to the south of where this is looking at. And one of my primary concerns is that if you were to go there right now, a large part of the area that's just on the north is underwater. So this is a very low area in our city, in our area. So you add an entire parking lot of pavement and asphalt, that water's got to go somewhere. As you look, there's just not a lot of places for that water to go retention-wise or whatnot, so it's going to go somewhere. Secondly, if you look, Kaysville, the we look back to whoever came up with the idea of the rail trail and the access point there. I mean, it's just a tremendous advantage to all of us. And you think of, adding this just right next to that rail trail, you've immediately got traffic problems, traffic congestion issues already. Now you're impacting the beauty of the trail there. Thirdly, as I'd mentioned, I just live right off Flint Street, and back to Josh' comments on already coming off Flint onto 200 is well past capacity. It wouldn't be in the C range; it would be in the D already at peak hours. So there's a lot of things that would be automatically creating extra congestion, extra water problems, aside from just adding and putting a commercial property in this area. I mean, you just see homes, right? So anyway, thank you for your listening.
Great, thank you very much.
Hello.
Hi.
My name's Ashley Cooper, and I live right here. And I'm concerned it is excessively vague. We moved into that house 14 years ago because of the location. I have a beautiful view. I've lost a considerable amount of my beautiful nighttime view to the light pollution that comes from America First and Neaters. I want to know, how are you going to bring in a facility like this with such a vague height recommendation when our homes can only be 30 feet, but it can be 35 at mid-pitch? I would really like the council to consider that. It really cuts into our view. We've been there for 14 years. I think if we're going to bring someone into the community, we need to consider that. I also want to bring up the trail crosswalk. My children, my daughter alone, has almost been hit there 3 times by people flying around people stopped at the crosswalk, blowing through a turn lane in order to pass someone. 3 times. I agree with the idea of a traffic study. I brought up light pollution. Also, I want to know about any hazardous materials. It's a medical facility. What kind of materials are going to be transported to and from, and how are they going to be secured? I think that's it. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you.
Can I ask you a question before you leave?
Please.
Sorry. Does the church currently block your view?
Kind of the way that it sits, it's not pitched. There's nothing really there. You were showing me some pictures showing a 2-level building. The church it just seems like it's flat and nondescript. But what you're showing there looks like it has a large pitched entryway to the roof and a 2-level. And then you're saying that there's not really any rules regarding height over general commercial. They can go above 35 feet if the council allows it. Is that did I hear that correctly?
But yeah, go ahead, sir.
Yeah. To respond to that, Mr. Chair. So yeah, as a conditional use permit, the general commercial zone does allow buildings of height. By conditional use, they can do that.
So that would mean it would have to come before the planning commission and there'd be notice of it. Okay. So if they were going for higher than the 35 at mid-pitch, then that would be notice to the neighborhood.
Okay.
What kind of conditions would be required, or what standards are there for them to go higher, Lyle?
So it just falls onto our, pull up the ordinance standards for consideration of a conditional use, which we've looked at in kind of previously. So it talks about how it, well, bear with me as I paraphrase, and I'm happy to pull it up as I'm doing so, but is it harmonious with the neighborhood, essentially the architecture, size, scale, and massing type language, so generic type terms that it speaks to.
I don't understand how that's enforceable. Meters, America First, Biz, the new placements, how are any of those in any way architecturally cognizant of the neighborhood in which they are established?
It's a good comment. So it's the challenge of the Planning Commission to make that determination on the case-by-case basis.
It sounds intentionally vague and inarguable with those terms. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, we're just taking your comments, but
I'd be happy to discuss.
It's not fair to interrogate Lyle. He's the maker of them.
I'll talk as much as wanted. So yeah, just you let me know, Mr. Chair, how much you want. But Yeah, that's.
So we need to take those issues up with council?
Yeah, ultimately, and that's something as a city we're constantly work on is many of these rules have been around for many, many years, and whether or not they've saved the community well is a political type question, if that's the appropriate way to have it or not, and if it's necessary to make those changes. I would think that this commission in general likes the idea of making it more clear and less vague.
Wilf, certainly. I mean, if you come to these meetings, it's like, oh, okay, here's Wilf again. He wants more precision,
I apologize.
more direction.
Would it behoove us to answer those questions and clarify those rules before an overpopulated area, an overdriven area? I'd like that question to be considered.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll show where I live as well. So my property is right here, this whole triangle, so I touch here. So my back deck is here, and I look right into that south.
Forgive the interruption, this is no comment to you, but there is a pointer for anyone else in the audience that you're welcome to use that on the map at the dais. So.
Okay. So I obviously have, so I'm Nicole Steed. I did email. And
We saw those pictures
yes,
of the deck.
Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, you guys saw that. So you can see why it's very concerning to me, kind of what goes on there. So my biggest concern, and if you did want to go area, kind of along with what she said, like it's a little hard to have such a lack of a plan that's being presented and to kind of know how that's going to move forward. I mean, if that's a retention pond, like what their plan is kind of with the current landscape, like those really old trees, I mean, would it be for sure taking those down? Or is that grayed out because they hope to maybe possibly sell that someday and a building could possibly go up at the very south end of that property? Like, I just wish there could be a little bit more clarification, and they're here tonight. Maybe they could shed some light on that. As well as just like green space, like what are the rules in transitioning into a neighborhood, like as far as fencing and just landscape screens and that sort of thing. Respect neighborhoods and have some type of a landscape screen there. My other, I guess, biggest concern with this is, here this plan has come and that this is the plan that's presented, and then let's say it gets rezoned to commercial, this falls through, and we end up with storage sheds, concrete to concrete, filling every part of that. Like, then does it come back to this council where we get to come and say, heck no, that's not what's going to go there, So those are my two biggest concerns. I mean, along with traffic, you guys talked about the plans on what you want to do for 200 North. I guess I hope that there's maybe a plan as far as what to do with Flint, because like they said, during, rush hours, I mean, you get traffic backed up the entire way back, going south. So, like I said, those are my concerns. I hope that they could answer that and maybe have a better plan before anything gets approved.
Great. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Linda Black, and I'm a resident of Mountain Vistas. I live just at the, we're right here. You said there was something there, but anyway, we're right there. So I just have a little thing that I heard statement just to, in speaking a little bit more in an overall sense for the city. But, sorry, I'm a little nervous. But our house is on the front line of the proposed project, and I'm here, as many residents are, to actually defend West Kaysville to remain single-family residential. And the City Council and the Planning Commission, they have an opportunity to shape the future of the rapid growth that's occurring in the city. And you can do this effectively with consistency. Maintain the residential zoning and don't allow the encroachment of unwanted commercial structures to invade the established and growing. See the building that's going on at the base of 200 North. There's a lot of people that want to live in that community, and when you muck it up with, mixing your residential with commercial, it just doesn't work and creates a lot of additional traffic in those areas. If this land is to be developed, I think it should remain consistent with the existing format of the land that is there, and continue with the same high-end single-family residential homes, perhaps as a Mountain Vista annex or as a standalone. Somebody lives here on that area of the Brighton homes that they built. They had a similar type of property there, and they built some very nice homes that are on that small patch of land. So I think City Council and the Planning Commission, you have the ability to exercise control. Kaysville has a commercial area already off of 900 West, and there's also some land off of 600 West down on Deseret that are empty plots of land, of commercial land, where you don't have to rezone. And there's also empty lots over on Sportsplex. And, you know, I go to a PT person, you know, so there's already medical things over in that area. So you could remain consistent with that. So I say exercise using the control of the existing zoning and the city ordinances to find this business a proper location. And I want you to ask yourself, is this project being considered because there's a need in the community? And the answer to that is unequivocally no, because, you know, we have a brand new hospital a mile away. They have urgent care. They have, you know, every discipline you could want in their clinic, along with a hospital. 5 miles away, you have a state-of-the-art University of Utah discipline over there. They have, you know, radiology. They have everything. So I ask you, why is there a need for this additional medical center right in the middle of a residential community? I don't think it's necessary. So don't lose control because one landowner has a deal for the highest bidder that is not consistent with the existing residential neighborhood. And please look to your neighbors to the south that I think they're doing an excellent job, Farmington, as far as developing a contained environment where there's a mix of businesses that operate successfully and are separate from the residential areas. They please maintain consistency and control when deciding viable projects that are presented to you.
Great. Thank you.
There's pictures there of property with phone numbers, so you guys can call them.
So I'm representing Don Gabdis. He lives in lot 4, right there. His home address is 37 North Tilly Circle. That patch of land, he was the gentleman that actually sold it to Brighton Homes for development. It's been in the family for about 7 generations now. And before it got before the houses were built on it, there was just a single house. It was just a little farmhouse, and that thing was ancient, but it was beautiful. Back then, that was about 4 years ago. My wife had started living there with her parents, and that road, Flint, was already chaotic. Like it just never has had a cease of traffic. It's always busy. And with all of the new subdivisions going in nearby, it's only going to get busier. And that's going to put a lot of strain on developments out west too. That's going to put a lot more strain on just that intersection. And as people have mentioned, that bike path, anytime somebody wants to cross it, they just push that button, lights go up, people don't stop. I've seen it many times where I'm coming out of the Smith's Marketplace and I just see cars just flying through as people are just trying to ride their bike right through that intersection right there. And I am strongly against developing that land into commercial, but I don't have a problem with needing another medical center. If somebody wants a medical center, that's fine. But as they stated, there was a medical center put in a mile away. An IHC, it's a beautiful hospital, and they have everything. Anything that they're a great hospital, and we actually considered using them for the birth of my baby girl that's now 2 months old. And we're over at that lot probably 4 or 5 times a week. And it scares me to even think that this would be a possibility with already the strain of traffic in there, to let my baby girl even walk out front. Because next thing you know, she's going to be out on Flint, and there's going to be 100 cars that are just backed up because that light doesn't contain the traffic well. So I would really advise a traffic study and possibly seeing where that takes us, but commercial property. So.
Great, thank you. Anyone else?
I'm Catherine Smith. If you'll flip the other view back on, I'll show you where my land is.
Okay.
Citizens fought the rezoning of this area for the Smith store for literally years. All those businesses located on the west side of Flint and the north side of 200 North were located there with a very generous tax concession. And, excuse me.
That's better, thank you.
Over strenuous objections of citizens who got thrown under the bus on that one. Still, we who live here respect and value what's left of Kaysville, the Kaysville we moved here for. You have brought us horrendous traffic and congestion. We are, however, still here, together with others who have recently moved here, some of whom have spoken tonight, with a country atmosphere in mind. I'm very against this rezone. Medical facility with attending noise, lighting, more traffic congestion, with an industrial commercial area just a block or two away. It's not lost on us that a breakthrough of commercial in this location on this side of 200 North could eventually lead to another 33rd South or an Antelope Drive right here in Kaysville. These are horrible speedways with lackluster strip mall type development. We don't want or need that in West Kaysville. We wonder why you do. Development like that is unattractive and basically outdated. Kaysville has done what I consider an inadequate job of planning. This has been brought up before. I want to give you some called by the city and ask if they could put a fire station on my land on Flint Street. That's part of that piece. That's maybe 100 yards from the corner of 2nd North. I can't even imagine what a mistake that would be traffic-wise and every other way. I was also asked whether I were interested in having my entire 2 acres rezoned commercial. What if I'd said yes? Is that the way the city plans? That's certainly no master plan unless you call hit or miss a plan. A plan where you let folks who want to sell land be your city planners. With that plan, you could really make a mess of this area. But it doesn't need to be that way. You could actually residential area not to have commercial butting up against our yards. When a landowner chooses to sell out, limits and clearly defined development areas could guide your rezones. Were you to rezone and allow any commercial development to stretch in a thin strip behind people's properties to the Brighton homes, these are some of the results that would be encountered. Noise and light pollution from the site, generally greatly exacerbated due to urgent care, which stays open late. Height of structure, current zone 35 feet, could go higher. Grounds and building lighting with dark sky compliance, necessary. Accessibility, need for walls, solid and high. I have attached a picture, and I'm going to leave this with you planning people so you can see it, of a nice wall. Large landscape buffers, crosswalk safety. It's been mentioned many times about the trail and how dangerous that is to have an exit on the 2nd North right that close to it. And it's such an easy extension for commercial zone farther down the south side of 2nd North, next to established residential areas. And there's the question of safe storage and removal of biological and general waste. So, I'm all for a difficult thing. It's not a horrible idea, the thing they're putting there. It's just that maybe it's the wrong place for it. Thank you.
Okay, next, please.
this. I'm going to use the pointer. All right. My name is Chad Hawkins, and I live right here. I think that's mine, right there. That's my property. And as a whole, I have specific concerns, but as anything that would turn Second North into an Antelope Drive. I would not, my home right now is 400 feet from Second North. I would not want to live 400 feet from Antelope Drive, nor would my neighbor Ashley Cooper or the other neighbors that live on this street or these neighbors here. And to me, commercial development on Second North, the more commercial development, the closer we're going to get to an Antelope Drive. Specifically speaking, it was mentioned about the safety of the rail trail. I am a runner and a cyclist. I use the rail trail all the time. I've crossed that place hundreds of times. And the reason why it's so dangerous, I'll talk loudly, is because, of course, specifically the thing that has not been mentioned is you have an entrance from Smith's here, and the proposed entrance is right here. The lights cannot be seen from the hundreds of cars coming from this direction and the hundreds coming from that direction. The lighting is going the wrong way. So if they're going to turn left or right, they're not going to see kids or bikes going across because the lights don't address the parking lots. Someone's going to get hurt. As far as the development itself, I echo my neighbor, Ashley, with the height. That should be defined and understood before this is approved, I believe, because any vagueness, I'm afraid of what will happen if it exceeds beyond. I believe, a good question someone asked, does the Bible Church roof line, is that blocking my view? Not at all. I'm okay with that as far as as a reference for me. I don't know how high it is, but it should not be allowed to be built any higher than the Bible Church, in my opinion. In City Ordinance 1734-1, it states that new construction in already developed areas should fit the flow and the harmony of the neighboring areas. Anything higher than the Bible Church, according to your ordinances, would not fit the flow or the harmony of the area. Honor your ordinance, keep it church. Lighting. I hope that all lighting, signage, interior lighting, exterior lighting, will comply with dark sky compliancy. So it's going to be a dark sky light. Please, I hope that the Ogden Clinic, if they do build their building, I hope they will be good neighbors and think about what it'd be like if they lived next to this. Would they want late night hours? Would they want bright lights, interior, exterior, or signage? Please enforce dark sky compliancy. And then finally, landscaping. For all the neighbors going all the way around, please define and enforce a buffer of grass. Keep it beautiful for the neighbors and the thousands that use the rail trail on a regular basis. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Jeff Lewandowski, live at 24 South Shadow Breeze Road. And I think, honestly, most everything has been said, over and over again about our concerns. For me, and we all sat in this council or this office here before, when Symphony was looking to develop that, as you may recall, what it started out being was small little lots, and then we ended up with kind of what we have now, more larger size homes, larger lots, to kind of fit the harmony of the area and the master plan. I think the city did a great job by working with us residents to come up with something that was reasonable and acceptable to the neighbors, and I think that's going to be a great addition to West Kaysville. This here just simply doesn't make sense. To cram commercial around an entire neighborhood with a throat width, I don't know, Brandon, a couple hundred feet? What's the throat width of that down here towards the bottom on the south end? Does developers, anyone know? The throat width of that is maybe 200 feet. To cram parking and to cram this down a small sliver surrounded by executive homes just doesn't make sense. I mean, I think you've heard the concerns. I'm not going to reiterate them. Definitely the deceleration lane. I'm an engineer. Whoever brought that up about UDOT, absolutely you need a deceleration lane
You'll find with the traffic study, I did like that comment, and you're definitely going to find the rating very high. Thank you for bringing that up. I think that's a definite requirement in my opinion. You'll find that the road's overrated for what it's designed for. But this just doesn't make sense. It's not in harmony with the neighborhood. It's not in harmony with the master plan. I think Linda Black really did a great job in outlining all the concerns of us neighbors. And Ms. Smith did as well as a long time, and the Smiths have been around a long time, as we all know. And if people in this audience or people sitting here at the table think even for 5 minutes that these old trees at the selling price of this property are going to remain, you're kidding yourselves. Every tree on that lot will be cut. I mean, this is very valuable property, as we all know. Those trees aren't going to stay. We can kid ourselves and pretend they are. We also know this is going to develop. Farmland's not going to stay. We understand. As residents, as neighbors, as business people. We understand. But let's control the growth. Let's not cram commercial in for the bottom line dollar of tax base or to sell at a massive price. That just doesn't make sense or fit our master plan. I strongly oppose it, and I hope you do too. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm Randy Clem, and I live right next to Catherine Smith on the east side of this property that we're talking about. I built my home on Flint Street in 1989. My property was zoned as residential agriculture. Oh, I don't need to hear me. I could hear me. I am not opposed to change, but I am opposed to commercial encroachment to residential properties. I have the same concerns as my neighbors do. Tonight I would like to talk about the security of our properties along the east and south side of the property. I don't care what anybody else says. It's been Jay's property ever since we've been out here. We've been out here 30 years. We're requesting a solid, no, I really can't talk. A very tall wall. I'm not talking about a 6-foot wall. I'm talking about an 8-foot wall, just like they have over on Legacy Parkway. Something we have security. And we have horses, and the last thing, horses are an attractive nuisance. That's what they're stated as. And kids or people will want to touch horses. They want to pet horses. They want to feed horses, and it's not safe. I've brought the picture walls, and I've got that of Layton Parkway. If you would like, this is what the walls look like. This wall would provide a backdrop for landscape to be put in place that would face the west. So all the west side people would look over that and see a wall, but see landscaping, trees, brush, whatever, to make it look nice. Livestock, and especially horses, are attractive nuisances, and the public will want to see and feed the horses. If you allow this zoning change, then the city needs to be sure that the citizens of Kaysville are safe, along with the children and livestock. Thanks for your consideration.
Thank you. Next, anyone else?
My name is Dee Hyde. I'm a lifelong resident of Kaysville. I live just to the east of the intersection there on the south side of the road. My main concern is the traffic. Right now, if I go out to get the mail out of my mailbox, I am 2 feet, literally 2 feet, from cars going 50 miles an hour on 2nd North. Yes, it has a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. Yes, there are signs on it, and they do not pay attention to it. Putting this will increase that traffic, increase the problem. This is something that the city has to concern whether this happens or not. This traffic on that road going that fast, there's going to be someone else seriously hurt. There's already been people killed trying to get across to Barnes Park from our subdivision area. I thank you for your concerns.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name's Scott Harwood. I live at Third Development as well.
And I do real estate development, so we've developed everything in Farmington, just north of Park Lane. So Cabela's and everything surrounding that has been my world. So the last thing I want to do, I sit through a lot of these public hearings. I don't want to reiterate or echo things that have been said so far, but I do support the comments that have been made to date. If a rezone is looked at and considered, I still think this isn't the place for that, but certainly a development agreement addressing some of the height restrictions, some of the lighting, some of the buffering, some of the landscaping certainly needs to be looked at. I deal in an ordinance in Farmington that is very, very robust in their mixed use. Here I'm just a little concerned that it's pretty general, pretty generic. So certainly looking at the general plan and the master plan and the mapping, it's really general here. You have to have some sort of development agreement in place to put conditions on a development like this if it were to be rezoned and go through. Again, I don't think that this is the place necessarily for that, but we do love the Ogden Clinic. Nothing against them. I just think that there's better places to put a facility of this scope, scale, and magnitude. Thank you.
Thank you.
I grew up on 200 North as a little kid, and I live in West Kaysville. I've lived there my whole life. I'll start by asking my neighbors to forgive me for having a different opinion. And I sell real estate for a living, and I think they're missing part of the picture. And obviously there's too much traffic on 200 North. I agree with that, etc. But a clinic like this generates some of the least traffic of any commercial entity. And what I see, I don't know how you get this thing to work. How's this thing work, Lyle?
Should be a red triangle.
What I see is you can put an end to this right here, but eventually something's going to go in here, and there's a great big space right here for something to be like another Smith's competition that will generate a whole lot more traffic. And I think if something like the Ogden Clinic was to go in right here, it will seal off that corner, and it'll prevent something bigger and more egregious from going in. So I would invite my neighbors to have a little bit of an open mind. I have nothing to gain by saying anything. I know all these people, but I think you got to consider that a clinic creates a whole lot less traffic than another commercial. I agree with them. There are things that still need to be looked at, etc. But in my opinion, I'd lots rather see this corner cut off from something gigantic. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me. I have a little bit of a cold. Benson Black. I'm Linda Black's husband, and I never could turn down an open mic. It is just what you really need to do if you're thinking seriously about this is go stand at the corner where the horses do right now and watch the traffic that comes out of Smith's, out the bicycle path. And when you come out and make a right turn out of Smith's, it's difficult to see those lights. Now, just imagine you have opposing lanes of traffic, both guys coming toward each other, trying to turn right on a busy street. They're trying to come across and turn left onto a busy street. The whole traffic study makes just absolute perfect sense. And a little rebuttal to the comment about this being a preemptive strike to avoid putting a bigger commercial property on the process. You hold the control over that. All you have to do is not grant the rezoning, and the other comments have already been made. This is a high-end neighborhood. It's a very nice neighborhood. This is a greenbelt area here that a lot of people walk their dogs up through here. I walk my puppy up through here quite frequently, make a loop and come back down the bike path and come back through. It's quite nice and picturesque and green, and the horses out there is not the worst part of it, believe me. Turning that into a big parking lot, it's already been said, the light pollution, the sound pollution completely changes the character of that part of the neighborhood. So Just
Good evening. I'm Robert Green. I'm the trustee for the J. Green Family Trust. And I know a lot of these folks here. And as I've talked to several of them, this is not personal, right? And you may take it that way, but things have changed in West Kaysville. I live in West Layton on Gentile Street. Kathy bought the home from my dad. It was the Webster home and redid it. Dad sold the Bible church. The hell that he went through selling a Bible church in a Mormon community, you know, but Dad did that. And then he sold to Randy Clem and then to Kathy. Kathy no longer lives in that home, by the way. She lives up in Peaceville. But what do you do with that? We look at our piece over here, and you talk about light. So here's Dad's home here, and there's no sound wall. There's no light. I mean, the lights are terrible there, right? Kaysville City bought that from my Uncle Vernon Flint, sold it to Smith's, which we love and everybody else does. So we're fighting to try to say, what fits in that piece of property? It's not high-end homes. And back in here, someone said put homes in here. There's no sewer back in here. You'd have to pump everything. Kaysville City doesn't like that. We felt it was just a natural fit. Does it change things? Yes. Does it change traffic? Yes. But we live in an area a lot different. And so there has been some folks that have approached the Bible Church and others to buy the entire property. And to those that are here tonight, I wish we could make and appease everybody, that they would be happy, including Kaysville City and neighbors. But we think it's a good fit. And we think that Ogden Clinic's a great clinic. And I guarantee you, why did 10 doctors leave a company called Intermountain to go to IHC recently? They're great. I've met with them. And so you're welcome, any residents, to call me personally, talk to me about it, or to the staff, any questions that you may have as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Kevin Porter. I'm the CEO of Ogden Clinic, and I want to say thank you for showing up and sharing your concerns. I'm here to answer questions. I'll respond to some of the things if it's okay with the council to answer some of their questions and talk through clearly, a challenge that we have in front of us. As we did some market research, and part of who we are as an organization is really trying to provide care in a convenient location. Our model throughout Ogden and Davis County has been to put clinics within the communities where we believe that there's a need, and we fulfill that need or look at that need based on where they're traveling from. And we have a large population of patients who live in Kaysville and Layton and Farmington who come and travel to our locations. And what we're looking to do with this particular site is we're looking to create an opportunity with some services that currently aren't offered in this area, and we have some of those that are defined and some of those aren't defined yet, speaking completely candidly. And what we hoped as we looked at property throughout the city, in both Layton and in Kaysville and Farmington, was to find a place where we would fit in, where we could be good neighbors, and where we could make a difference to the community. And as we looked at it down in Farmington Station. We've looked at property up by the hospital in Layton. And all indications as we looked at this, we kept coming back to this green property. And ironically, it wasn't even for sale at the time that we were looking at it. And as it came to be, and as we started negotiating and talking to them, realizing that it was for sale, we found where we want to call home in Kaysville. And we recognize that creates a lot of controversy among the neighbors. And I hear your concerns. And I want to share some stories that we've done as we've placed clinics in communities. We recognize that we need to be good neighbors, and that there's been no preconceived notion about what that building is, or how high it is, or what we're going to develop, right? We showed some pictures as to what we've developed in the past, so you could see the architecture of what we tried to develop in a building, and our look and feel that we try to create, which we believe is a good look and feel. We recognize that we want to create a beautiful place. I live in Kaysville as well, and as my neighbor built their home, they built it beside me, and took away some of my view, which is frustrating. And I recognize that
not everything remains perfect all the time, but our goal and concept in developing at this location is to be. We'll talk about building height. We'll talk about the placement of where that needs to be, so that we can work through that to make peace and work through. Again, at the end of the day, frankly, we hope that you all become patients of the center and of the physicians and love the clinic that supports the community. That's not going to happen if we're not a good neighbor and we come in and create a lot of loud noise and light. In other properties, we have created masonry fences to make sure that we create a barrier, whether that be for livestock, whether that be for homes. We want to make sure that the neighbors feel comfortable, and we coordinate that during the construction process. As we develop an exit to this site, I think it's key to recognize and realize where traffic is coming from and what is the ease. And we've worked through different studies at different sites to understand what is the best place and then relocate our facility accordingly. As we looked at this site and we created a very preliminary site plan, was really to give an idea of what we were thinking. If you look at the site plan, you look at the parking stalls, those parking stalls are placed there just to give you an idea. It was mentioned there's 360 stalls or so. There's no way that we're going to have 360 full stalls in this facility all day long, right? Depending on the size of that building, and really that depends on the scope. The good news is the property's big enough that we're at 2 stories and keeping it the height limit that we need to. The building can expand a little bit, right, and grow. And there's some things that we work through and believe we can make work. Talking about medical waste, I think that's important, and recognize that we treat that very seriously, right? The medical waste that would be at this facility would be simply your bloodborne pathogens and your sharps, right? That would be part of any sort of medical facility. All of that's treated appropriately, disposed of appropriately, secured constantly and continuously to make sure that it's compliant and safe from all public forums. If you look at our landscaping throughout, where we've been in other communities, it's imperative, and we want it to be a great place for people to come and visit. And again, we're happy to work with the city and with neighbors to understand and make sure that those trees stay, and that there's great landscaping and beauty to what we're trying to accomplish. We recognize the controversy. Certainly our hope as we go through this is that it does rezone to commercial. We have a strong plan in place to develop this property and don't intend whatsoever to resell the property, and I recognize the concern and the challenge that may come, right, of thinking, oh, what happens if it rezones and then Ogden Clinic decides to back out and sell. Our full intention is to build a beautiful clinic and for it to be around since 1960. We started as a small physician-owned group in Ogden, and we've grown and expanded over the years. We're physician-owned, we're independent, we plan to be independent moving forward. So.
Yeah, we may call you back up for
Please.
more questions, but it's still a public hearing, so
Yep, you
your
bet.
3 minutes
Thank
are up.
you.
Thank you.
Did you do your time? You didn't do the time on it.
My bad.
Anyone else? Going once, going twice. Okay, the public hearing is now closed. We'll open it up to the commission discussion. And I'll thank you all for your participation.
I was just going to say I am happy to hear that Ogden Clinic is willing to listen to the viewpoints and to the opinions expressed and the concerns and to address them. And that, I think that's great. That's great that they're willing to have a discussion, maybe do a 2-story versus a 3-story. Some of the big things I think are really important. And I was going to ask you, Lyle, a traffic study would come before a decision, right? I mean,
Should the planning commission or the council desire one, yes. So we don't.
I don't think it's normally required.
As a case of action, it is not required.
At this point.
It could be required of you. It's going to take to resolve concerns.
Okay.
But yeah, Tammy, if you feel like that it would be helpful to have, I think you could certainly request it. And I actually think it would be helpful to.
It's
just
come up
kind of
several
go-
times, and it probably will continue. I'm thinking we should know. It'd be helpful.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the issue, there's no question that there's going to be more traffic. And Second North is already pretty busy. But just about anything that develops is going to increase traffic.
Yeah.
And the question just is to what extent and at what times, and that all depends on what the use is. Not a lot of guidance in the city's development around the city, so it's a real just kind of like.
But it does say commercial around the major.
Commercial should be located on major streets. Yeah.
And I think that ties in with the other point. That I think we do have to ask what else would go there. I don't think we're going to get the same kind of large estates going in there. And the other question I had was with this second lot, the lot to the south, is there any access to that at this point?
So currently it's all owned by the same family. Without its ownership, the parcel to the north, it wouldn't have an alternate access.
Yeah. So obviously north, looks destined for something more than the half-acre lots. It's probably either multi-unit housing, high-density housing, and/or commercial. Mm-hmm. And then we start asking the question, which is better for the community to have, something like the Ogden Clinic or something else that would go there, and what else would go there?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's inevitable that the properties will all develop eventually at some point. Yeah. The question just is with what, and what's their impact going to be.
Lyle, Mr. Green, I think, mentioned something about sewer not having access unless it was pumped from that long portion where the parking lot is. That sewer district?
Yeah, so I've heard from multiple individuals, and I'm not as familiar with the site as maybe some of the residents here that have lived in the area, but I do know that the property elevation drops several feet from the back of curb and the grade of the street, so it sits pretty low, and then typically in order to get sewer to work, it's got to flow downhill into the pipe, so depending on how deep the sewer actually is in Flint City 200 North, determines whether or not that's viable, and at a distance such as that, it may be very difficult to get sewer without mechanical systems to pump it up.
Okay. And I know the development agreement, we're not at that point yet, but it would be interesting to see, some more detailed plans in terms of what they would, taking into consideration the comments that have been made, what else they're willing to do or what else they're willing to come up with.
Well, and to be clear, we can do the development agreement here. We can tie that to the rezone. So we'd say the rezone, they can't be higher than 35 feet or whatever limitations, take into consideration lighting, landscaping, buffering, all that can be included to whatever degree we feel necessary to make this zone work if we are so inclined.
Okay.
I just have sort of a general comment that probably won't be terribly helpful at this point, but part of our conundrum goes to Wilf's point somewhat. We're in this, at least from my perspective, we're in this transition phase in terms of city staff and a vision of how ordinances were written and general plan was, put into effect, of being very general and very open and sort of hands off. My understanding, I still don't know what the timing on this is. Maybe you guys know, or staff can tell us. We're going to be changing that soon. We're going to be updating the general plan, and I think we've engaged a consultant. I could be wrong, and we might move to something that's more prescriptive like we've been talking about. But right now, we're just like stuck in this middle zone where I would love to have, if you expanded the view, Lyle, or just maybe pulled up the zoning map, I would love to have, this is our zoning map, I would love to have, citizen input on a general plan map. And I know there's pros and cons to a general plan map, yeah. But a general plan map probably, now you probably won't clap about this, would probably say something else is going to go in here than RA at this intersection. This whole spot right here is probably going to get developed in the next 10 years, is my guess, and it's most likely not going to be residential. Maybe multifamily, which is another curse word out here. Yeah. So we're just in this phase of like, we have all kinds of leeway, and it's maybe conducive to approving this or not approving it. And we don't have a lot of direction based on city council might think or whatever. Maybe that's an argument to say, let's put this on hold. But again, I'm not one to usually say that if people have listened to me before. So I told you that wouldn't be terribly helpful, but those are just some rambling thoughts.
I mean, if we look at what could go there, and certainly on other commercial uses, there are commercial uses that could be a much higher impact than what this one would be. So from the standpoint of it's going to be something commercial, this is probably, in the mid-range, and probably not that bad as some other things could be. And when I say bad, I'm just talking about maybe like traffic impact and adjacent. But as Josh just pointed out, I mean, it's by that intersection. There's already a major commercial development across the street. Up Flint to the north, there's other commercial development along there. It's not unusual to see additional commercial development. I mean, it kind of attracts. And if you're going to do that, that's probably a place where you're going to have lesser impact on surrounding uses than if you were to go in an area that were entirely residential. So from that standpoint, it kind of makes some sense. But it's always, we're going to add more traffic to 200th Street as well. If that gets rezoned, it'll get that too if it's residential. Probably just different character, and maybe not as much, but still it's going to be there. So it's an interesting question here.
I have a question then for you. We talk about traffic studies, and I know, people want them. Basically, a traffic study on 200 North will tell us that there's a lot of traffic, right? So if it comes back and it's rated as high, yeah, this is a really high traffic area, then what's the response to that?
Well,
yes, and we can't, do we put in stoplights? I mean, what happens next?
I'll just tell you my thoughts on what I would like to see out of a traffic study.
Okay.
Can I just answer that, though?
Yeah.
Because Lyle said there was enough room to make more lanes. So that would be one way that you would expand capacity.
Okay.
And there's also other tricks that, with as far as walkways and traffic lights and speed bumps and whatever else traffic engineers come up with. But.
Okay.
I just think a traffic study gives us information. Shocker. But what I think it would be nice, and we've done this elsewhere, on the rezone that was proposed down Angel, by Angel and 200 North a few months ago. We said, okay, tell us a traffic study of what the traffic would look like under RA, if it got developed with permitted uses under RA. What would the traffic impact be? What would the traffic impact be if it were rezoned to maybe a little more dense residential or multifamily residential? Maybe I'm just asking, this is my request of what a traffic study would say. I know that there's different scopes of traffic studies. And then what would it look like, what would the traffic impact be for a general commercial use? Something's coming in here. What impact are we willing to live with, and do we desire to have, because it's going to get developed at some point. And then you have all the options, and you say, okay, this one isn't as bad as we thought, or look, it's worse than we thought, and then you can make a more informed decision.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that.
Well, when you look at the property, I mean, you've got the property on the northeast side of it is a church. It's not residences.
Yeah.
So from that standpoint, it sort of can be made to fit a lot easier than if it were homes that were adjacent on that side, where the building is proposed to go, and the rest of it is just proposed to be a parking area at this point, which can be mitigated with landscaping and buffering and some other things like that. And as far as the impact to the homes goes, could be fairly minimal from that standpoint. The height, you get a little bit of a distance away from it. You look at it, compared to what you see beyond with the mountains, the height, it's limited to 35. I don't know that I'd want to see it go, but I don't know that you're from any distance to the west, you're going to have much of a visual impact from that.
On that note, do we have a sense of what the Kaysville Bible Church elevation is?
I could pull up an image of it on Google Earth if you'd like to see it. I couldn't tell you the height.
Yeah, okay.
We were just curious.
It's about 20 to 25 feet.
I was going to say, it's a single-story building, right?
Correct. It's got a high pitch.
Or does it have 2 stories?
2 stories.
It has 2, okay.
It's primarily a single-story building it extends. That's 2 stories.
Oh, okay.
That's 2 stories.
Wow.
Well, and I was going to say, if I realize there's a church just on the next block. Well, there's 2 churches next to the block. If they were asking for a church to be put here, I don't think anyone would be upset. Maybe I'm wrong, but it would, with a parking lot and maybe a shorter building that's not so tall. And I realize that a clinic would have, more daytime cars passing through, but I do think it's a good use for the property if it can be, some of the issues and some of the concerns can be, offset by the developer and the builder being willing to listen to those and trying to talk through those issues.
Well, and it sounds like most of the issues can be addressed by the developer with the, which, that was the overwhelming theme from everyone who spoke. Traffic.
Well, and the traffic study won't necessarily address the issues, but it'll at least give us
Give us
the
some
information to analyze it.
Yeah. And I don't know how we solve that necessarily. Will this draw that much more traffic? I believe what was mentioned is they kind of like a neighborhood feel. This is for you. It's going to draw people that live near there. I'll be completely honest. I live on the east side of Kaysville. I've never stepped foot in that Smith's. So are you? I'm guessing everyone in this audience has been to that Smith's because it's close. So you're going to be the ones going to this. It's not drawing traffic from Farmington and Layton and other areas. It's drawing people primarily from within the neighborhood. That's their intention. I think that it's not drawing. I don't believe it's going to be drawing tremendous amounts of outside traffic, so to speak. It was mentioned there's a new hospital in Layton. There's University of Utah medical facility in Farmington. Those are huge, and those draw people from other areas. The intention with something of this size to draw hundreds of people, or as was pointed out, 4 trips a day for 350 stalls. We're looking at, 1,400 visitors per day. I don't think that that's the case, but hopefully that's what the traffic study would resolve for us.
Yeah, well, I think we can direct the traffic study if we if we condition this on a traffic study, or if we table this pending a traffic study, we can ask for, whatever we want to be analyzed, and that would include, number of trips and access. I think it's a valid, I think it's a real concern, the access in and out, the Smith's access, which is a little bit funky, and
the trail.
And the trail. I use that area a lot, and I know exactly what they're talking about. Yeah. So I think a traffic study that would need to include both the capacity of 200 North and whether there's some traffic mechanisms that could, mitigate any kind of damage, and then also the access.
Well, Tamara had mentioned a light. Can we put a light there?
At the trail?
Just
that includes the trail and the 2 entrances.
Oh, right, yeah.
We put those entrances.
That's true. You could coordinate that.
If you coordinate that and have it all together, then it's not a flashing yellow light that people, it's a red light that people have a little bit more respect for.
And maybe you coordinate that. If there's a development, whatever development that goes in here, then maybe that exit and entrance ought to be coordinated with the Smith's exit entrance.
Yeah, absolutely.
So. They could even have it be the same light, just have a light there, and the same light be it.
And for the trail right now, I'm a little surprised that they haven't put in like what's called a hawk signal, which is what they have one on the rail trail at Layton Parkway, a little further up the trail, which is where you actually have the light turns red, which stops traffic. And then after a few seconds, after a number of seconds, it then flashes to stop. And if there's nobody in the trail, then they can proceed, and then it turns off.
I agree with the concern, though, that if you're coming out of Smith's, you can't see that.
Right, I agree.
And you don't know, and so you turn and.
Yeah. There's ways
But
to deal with that, though. You can put a light on a post, you know, right there, so it is visible, right?
Yeah, it just a secondary light of the same on the same light.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask this question a minute, and I don't want to shortcut too much discussion if we're inclined to discuss more, but I think we have one option. Obviously, we have multiple options, but one option is to say we'll consider this, we'll table it pending a traffic study, or we can talk about whether we want to make a recommendation study, right? We can make a recommendation to the city council and say do this or not do that, and also consider the traffic study. So those are two ways we can talk about it. And if we are going to table it, then we might talk about what conditions we want to see that would make this a favorable or an unfavorable recommendation. And then we'll get the traffic study. Does that sound about right, Lyle, or is there?
Yeah, those are all appropriate options.
Lyle, there's no widening or anything that's planned in the future for Second North?
No plans, so any plans that we do have essentially are within the existing right-of-way and curb that we have set.
Yeah.
Either when do we have a pretty good idea, like a certain idea or a relatively certain idea that West Davis corridor, the interchange will actually be in place out at the end of 200 North here?
So I believe they start construction on that possibly as early as next year. And I think it's a 3-year project roughly, so 2022, give or take, that facility will be in place.
Okay. Meaning that's when we'd start to have cars entering and exiting 200 North at that point.
Yeah, I think that'd be a completion date is that year. I think that'd be a completion date is that year.
And then my second question, and this was a comment I believe mentioned, will there come a time, and if so, when would that be, that 200 North, any portion of it west of, I suppose, wherever UDOT ends, becomes a UDOT road out west?
It's just guesswork on that. So, cities and UDOT fight frequently over who ought to have it and who shouldn't have it. And
UDOT's in the mode of shedding roads right now.
Okay.
They're trying to get rid of roads and turn them over to locals right now as much as they can.
Got it.
And we're happy to have them maintain them, but we like the control of the street as much as possible, and there are pros and cons to holding on to. For example, historically, north of 200 North used to be a UDOT road. It is now a city road up through Layton, so they can change hands. I'm not aware of any conversation that 200 North west of essentially the interchange and the overpass would go to UDOT. I'm also not aware that will never happen.
Did you have a second thing, Josh?
Well, I asked the second question, but I'll just maybe offer my general opinion. I think I personally would like to see more information. I think if, for example, if we did have a traffic study, not only, of course, would that benefit our decision or our recommendation, it would ultimately benefit the city council's decision. And I also think that there's a number of concerns that we could just list off that we all heard. Many of them are the same. Some of them, there's a list when you add them up. I personally think it might be a good idea to capitalize on the applicant's willingness to work with the citizens and say, let's get a traffic study, and why don't you hear from them in a forum that's different than this, and let them be heard, and if there can be a compromise, great. If there can't be, then that can be shared at the next time it comes back, and we'll have more information.
I had a question for the applicant disposal. What are you expecting to have? How do you deal with that? Is this hazardous waste? Is it treated that way? Could you kind of elaborate on that?
Yeah, so typically there's times when you're treating wounds, right, or infections where you would treat blood or
bodily fluids, if you will, right, that are treated and you put in hazardous waste baskets, right, red baskets. If you've ever been to a doctor's office, you'll see that. Or you'll have sharps, needles, or something like that from a shot or injection that you'd place in sharps containers. So typically in a clinic or a hospital, you would take those at the end of the day and you would put, we contract with Stericycle or whoever our medical waste management company is, and they come retrieve those from the locked facility, wherever that's located, whether it be in the building, right, wherever that's at, and then they take it in their trucks, incinerate it, and move on. So it's not like we're handling medical waste. We're not transporting medical waste in, right? The medical waste that's generated is from the patients that we're seeing at the facility.
Okay, and I guess my concern, and maybe more of what I heard, was you don't just throw it in the dumpster out back.
Correct.
And you don't have an incinerator on site.
Absolutely not.
Okay, thank you.
Pond at the end.
The very bottom part is really vague. Like, what are we doing with that part? Is that going to be parking? Is that like a retention pond? What are there big trees there? What are we doing?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? I mean, because of the shape of the property, we know where we're putting the building, but we've not gotten into the great detail yet. First of all, we're kind of going through our steps as to figure out how it all works, but we know that the property slopes that way and that we're going to have to deal with water somehow. So the architect did show that kind of gray area as a retention pond because we're going to have to deal with that water. Whether it's landscaping and ice, I don't know exactly what that is yet, but the intent is that the building is on the front part of that property, and it's not going to be obtrusive, right, destructive by any means. It's going to be something that adds value to that property. Whether that be employee park, right, picnic tables, I don't know what that is yet, but
There are like big trees,
Mhm.
like big mature trees there. You mentioned one, I think, was this, instead of getting ourselves, we thought that they were going to be fine. Do you have any thoughts on that?
yeah, we would have no reason. In fact, most of the time we bring trees in because there's an architectural schedule that we work with the city in creating that landscape and the trees. I mean, if there's trees that are existing, there's no reason for us to cut that down. I'll tell you, when we redeveloped the building that you saw is located at all of that, we went through tireless processes to save as many trees as we could on that site. There's a pine tree that still sits right where we tried to save, and ultimately it died because of where it was and it was removed. But there's no reason for us to remove those if there's no reason to remove them. And we're not looking at putting something into the back there that those trees would cause problems with.
Well, and I think to Josh's point, this is the discussion that we're hoping you'll have outside of this forum, that those things can come up. What about these trees? I don't know that you've even seen the trees. I walked there this afternoon and looked at them, and quite frankly, if I was a developer, I'd probably cut them down. They mostly look like trash trees. You know, they're not in a nice row. They're not evenly spaced. They're kind of all over and haphazard. I hate cutting down trees, but if they don't fit, they don't fit. Cut them down, plant a new tree, and in 10 years, you've got a better tree. But those are the discussions we're hoping you'll have with the residents in a different forum.
And I think there's enough motivation that this doesn't have to happen. It doesn't have to take a long time to happen. This could happen in a matter of weeks, I think, if there was enough notice to citizens, and there's mechanisms to get the word out nowadays. This could happen quick, and you could be back with all that information from the neighbors.
So if we're going to give some instruction, I mean, I think I'm inclined to consider the rezoning and favorably, but I would like to see more detail to what you're proposing to develop and how to develop that there, and address the traffic. I think that would need a little more treatment, maybe some more solid figures as to the number of vehicles per day that you usually have at your clinics, and how that might be best handled with an entrance or an exit on that site, given what's there with the Smiths and the trail and everything. The scale of your building and how that might be situated, buffering and landscaping that you might do around it, particularly adjacent to the residents, and work out some details like that and see if, and we strongly encourage you, I think, to talk with the residents in the area about that. They may not necessarily wind up agreeing with you, but at least you've made the effort, and we could hear that again, and then I think we see some more detail then we might consider the recommendation on the rezone.
Lyle, will you go back to that picture that outlines the property in yellow? I just had a quick question. Okay, so if the zoning wasn't changed, how would that, this is the only access to the property, right, along Second North, right?
Correct.
So basically, you could make 2 lots out of it, and they'd be kind of long? I mean, but I guess my point I'm trying to make is, I don't know, I think what they're suggesting is a reasonable use for the property. More reasonable than keeping it residential and hoping that someone might buy that to put, I don't know, a big house or 2 houses. I mean, is that enough for 2 houses or 3?
So, yeah, I've never seen it laid out. The property owner may have more to say to that. It's roughly 4.5 acres, so with a private road or flag lot type configuration, you could probably fit multiple homes.
The parcel that abuts 200 North is 4.5 acres? Or the
So
whole?
the entire property, so the 2 pieces.
So how much is
all combined.
the property that abuts 200 North? What's the acreage of that?
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, I heard 2. I'm guessing that you're about 2 and 2.5.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm hearing 2 from.
Odd shape.
It's just.
Yeah, the rest of it is whatever happens with the rest of it. Then.
Well, that's the, right, I mean, that.
Well, and if your houses were there, the rest of it's landlocked. You can't access it, or they, I guess that's kind of what we're looking at in terms of what's reasonable. And I know it's general commercial is not what everybody's hoping to hear, but I think if you can have some discussions and you come to some kind of a balance, it's good. Your other what would probably come back if we said no, we don't want the Ogden Clinic there or something. It would come back as we want town something, so it would be some kind of higher density housing. That's the option that would come back. So to Will's point, I think it makes sense. This is a good use for the property if we can come to some sort of agreement in terms of what it looks like and the height, and to offset some of your concerns. So that's what I'd be comfortable doing.
I agree.
So I tried to set it up earlier. The question would be, do we want to make a recommendation with a condition on a traffic study or a development agreement with some specified terms, or do we want to just table and then go through the planning and the development agreement terms later? Because you listed some of them. I think a few that were missed was, one of them was the light pollution concerns, and that's obviously, the city does that anyway, but and the masonry fences and buffering and landscaping, those kinds of things. We've talked about those. So does someone want to make a motion, or do you want to have more discussion as to how to proceed? I think I have a feel for where we are. But.
What's the best way to go about it? I mean, I don't think tabling's probably the most effective thing to do, right?
Oh, I think it would be.
It would be? Okay.
I think it gives them the opportunity to.
Well, I mean, yeah, for sure tabling. Okay, so that we can say this is what we want. Yeah, some guidance.
With instructions, and we listed a bunch of those, I think.
Do you want to relist those in a motion? And
yeah.
Yeah, if I can
You did
remember.
a great job.
I was gonna say, good luck.
All right, well, I would make a motion then that we table this request for the rezone of the, now I got to get the details.
That's right.
Back here.
It's right there. It's up.
Oh, there we go. For the 4.7 acres at 325 West 200 North from RA to the GC zone, with the instructions or recommendation to the applicant that they work with the neighborhood and get some more detailed development of the site, traffic numbers, and traffic. I don't know that I would necessarily say a study, but at least some more detail on the traffic, entrance and exit configuration, building configuration, landscape and buffering, and let's see, you all had some others as well, I think.
Lighting.
Light pollution.
Light pollution.
Water
right,
retention.
and water retention, and among others.
Height.
Maybe other things. And height.
Building height.
Did you? So I got caught up on one of the things you said and then didn't listen to part of it. Did you say have them meet with the neighbors?
We'd
Engagement.
I'd say we encourage that.
Because you're saying you don't want to impose that?
Well,
I don't know.
those are the issues that we're going to be addressed as we make a recommendation.
Yeah.
Right.
I thought you said you didn't want to impose a traffic study, a formal traffic study.
Right, no, I'm, you know,
Okay,
I'm not-
so let me clarify on that one too. How do you get traffic information without a study?
They can provide us, I'm guessing the Ogden Clinic probably has some numbers of the number of vehicles they have in and out of their clinics on a daily basis.
I feel,
And their
I feel a
size.
friendly motion, amendment coming on, Josh.
Yeah, and that's fine, Josh.
Well,
I'm just trying to form this into a
Sure,
process.
yeah, and I'm just clarifying the
He's
motion.
in the middle of his motion.
Trying to clarify
Yeah,
it.
no,
That's
and
it.
I think we're doing the right thing.
Okay.
I'm just saying,
That's
why don't
it.
you amend it and say if you want to have a study, because that's where I'm.
Yeah, and that's what I'm getting at. I'm
If you
just
want
trying
to
to
add
say,
that, I'm willing to.
I guess what I would like to see more detailed
More-
information from the traffic study that goes a little broader on, it gives us more on Flint, it gives us.
Oh, and to the intersection
It
probably.
gives us,
Well,
200 north, and we see what that's looking like currently, kind of my comment at the very beginning, what the levels of service already are,
Yeah,
and what they are projected to be with certain uses
right.
Well,
that
and
may
I'll-
be different than this one.
And I'll make a point that that specific configuration where the rail trail comes, the path goes this way and there's a fence and you have to go around it.
And it jogs,
And then
yeah.
there's a road that comes out and it has kind of a couple of bends in it, and then you have the intersection. That part wouldn't be included in the Ogden numbers, Ogden Clinic numbers, but it
You wanna
would.
broaden
No,
it?
but
I
they-
wanna
yeah,
include it in the traffic study. So that's
It's a
why-
little broader, yes.
Yeah, I would say that I would like to have the motion have the traffic study be, included.
Okay.
So do you want to make that amendment and then we'll vote on it, or?
Wilf?
No, I'm fine. I accept that as part of the
Okay,
motion.
okay. So now we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Or are we done?
Well,
Sorry.
I should have jumped in quicker. One way or the other, but why would we not say, go meet with the neighbors? And just say it as a suggestion?
Have an open house.
I don't know, it's just my, I don't know that we.
You don't want to
We can force,
dictate.
can't force people to do that,
Well,
It's like-
maybe you can force them to have a meeting, whether the neighbors come or not is up to.
Yeah, I
the
suppose
neighbors.
so. I would certainly encourage them to meet with the neighbors. I mean, if they don't, they're likely when they come back here, the neighbors are probably going to be here again and not be very happy.
Yeah.
I think what we're looking for from the developer is some clarity. I think what got out was there's 35-foot or taller building going up that's going to be blocking all of our views. We permanent use on the very south end of this. Just clarify this for them. This is a retention pond. That's our plan. A little more specificity. This is an example that we're using. This isn't exactly what's going in. If you want to limit it to 25 feet, Ogden Clinic, yeah, we're happy to do that, then great. A lot of these things can probably be knocked out without having to come back here. Neighbors might not get everything they want, but again, it's a fair compromise. And you've heard a lot of their concerns tonight. Clarify it for them and say, we're willing to do some of these things. I think the fact that you're putting it on the east side of the lot as opposed to the west side of the lot right up against the rail trail, the building, it appears, is only going to abut one neighbor. This whole lot really only has 4 physical points of contact with residential homes. It's very rare that we get a lot like this that
Yeah,
isn't
pretty
just
minor.
house that we have to deal with. There's a lot of green space with the rail trail and with the walking trail in between. I mean, I was honestly shocked. There's 3 fences between these houses and where the clinic is going. So if someone is worried about their privacy, somebody to get from the Ogden Clinic to some of those houses in Mountain Vistas has got to go over 3 fences. That's fairly private. Address all of these things with the neighbors. Or when you come back and you say we chose not to, that speaks volumes as well. Back to your motion.
I'm
You're
done
done?
with my motion.
I'll second your motion then. Recommending.
Do we have
table.
clarification? You're wanting to require a meeting?
No,
Okay.
I was just
That's good enough.
good.
Okay.
And and
Look,
we can always point to what happened with Ivory, for example, over by,
Deseret.
yeah.
Well,
gosh.
the applicant's here.
Yeah.
They've heard what we've said.
Yeah, exactly. If I'm the applicant and I'm hearing this discussion and I'm hearing what the neighbors have said and
Yeah.
what the tenor of their comments have been, it's with the neighbors.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
So,
And I say, you look at what happened with Ivory by Boondocks.
Yeah.
And they did a broad, pretty good outreach to the neighbors. And when they came back here with their plan, there was nobody here.
Yeah.
There were no neighbors here to object to it.
Yeah.
That was a pretty good outcome.
Well, and the Ogden Clinic's desire is to have them all as patients. I think they're probably going to try and do something to make them happy.
I'm happy to make
just
this
saying.
easy. We're willing to meet with the neighbors.
Okay.
And anybody who's willing to meet or wants to meet, just leave your name and number with us, an email, so we can get in contact, and we'll set it up and create a meeting. But that makes it easy so that we're happy to have the discussion and talk about things, right? We're very open-minded, so.
Right.
As a procedure, we have a second.
Tabling motion and a second.
And I think it's yes, so please vote.
Aye.
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 Okay.
Should we summarize what we just
I think we're good.
We've got it in the minutes.
Does anybody not know what we talked about for the last hour? Okay. All right. Let's
Thank you
see.
all for being here. I think what someone
Okay, we have one more item left, so if you want to talk, please exit.
I think. You thought you were going home?
Oh, I didn't think that. Oh, yeah, well, 2 ordinances, that's right.
It could be a blessing or a curse, and in this case.
Okay, next item is an ordinance amending multiple sections of the Kaysville City ordinances modifying the requirement for pressure irrigation east of US 89 and requiring communications conduit with new subdivision development.
Skipped ahead one.
You
Did
skipped
I?
ahead, yeah.
Yeah, we're doing the home occupation one
Jeez,
first.
I have
It's
to
like
read that
I am
all over
reading a
again.
totally different thing here. My eyes are bad.
I wish I had paper. An ordinance amending Chapter 1726, Home Occupations of Title 17, Planning and Zoning of the revised ordinances of Kaysville City.
Throw in a quick caveat. I think this one is fairly non-controversial, so I think we can get through it. I'll just quickly introduce. So we do have to hold the public hearing at least on both of these, and whether or not you're ready to make a decision on them, we're at 9 o'clock already.
Right.
I'll
Yep.
defer to you and your wisdom.
So we'll
on
have
what
the
it
public
does.
hearing on both, and then we've satisfied that.
Yeah, we'll at least
Requirement,
do that. And then if you'd like to address this one first, I'll have you introduce this one. Or if you want to wait while there's public here, we can introduce the other item, and I'll give that. But
I mean, I'm going to look out and say, is there anyone here that wants to address the second ordinance, rather the next item as opposed to this one?
Okay.
All right, I think we
If
can
you
just
can hear that.
proceed as planned.
Okay. So this gentleman here said he is from Weber Basin. He's here to speak to the second ordinance. I'll go through this one just briefly. So this is, just by way of introduction, again, we've been speaking of this, so I won't go into extreme detail, but in consideration of our home businesses and ultimately the procedures by which we consider them. And so based on discussion that we've had, we put together in an ordinance format some considerations for the Planning Commission. Again, looking for a recommendation ultimately to forward to the council. Just as mentioned, if we're ready to make that recommendation tonight or table, it's an ordinance action, so it's our time frame. Ultimately, what I've put together through this, the main portion is to pick a few select business types that we've dealt with and seen on a regular basis as we get these, like we had earlier today, home businesses that come before the Planning Commission. I've created a new category within our ordinances. So we have a major home occupation A, which is a very limited number of businesses that can have an employee that assists them at their home business. Regularly, it's just the residents. Our major home occupation B, like we saw tonight, don't have employees that are coming to the site, but they may have a customer or groups that are coming, so they may have items or equipment that stand out a little more than a typical home. So a new category, what I've proposed within this is a major home occupation C, where we just pulled a few of those out of the B category, essentially like a hair salon. I'll scroll back down through my ordinance here. Massage therapy, a very small group, lessons. I put a dressmaker on there. I've seen a few that over the years we just haven't done anything with. So there were a few that I selected that we could just put into a new category They still have extremely similar. I didn't change much of the language from the ordinance as far as what restraints a home occupation. Not going to get the neon signs. They still have to deal with traffic and equipment. But I think there were businesses that we're familiar with, and we haven't been putting conditions on that perhaps we could move into a staff level administrative decision so that they aren't coming necessarily before the planning commission each time. So that's the major part of the ordinance. There's a second component to it as I was going through making changes and discussing it with our legal staff. We have a youth enterprise ordinance, and just from a enforcement and administrative issue, it's a little tricky. So it's essentially set up so that lemonade stands, things like that can operate. We're not requiring licenses out of that time, or people who are babysitting or kids that are mowing lawn. They're not necessarily operating at their own house, and there's a $1,000 limitation requirement in there. You know, it's extremely difficult, you know, to look at their books and see what kind of business they're doing. And I think the state, you know, our minor home occupations are optional now, and there may be people that are making tens of thousands of dollars. You know, so from a monetary basis, it's a unique comparison, an imposition on some of these youth categories. So that's the final part is kids 17 and under, so if it's a minor, and kind of take out some of the limitations on the income. And there was some language that says who live on the premises, so if you do have a few 10-year-olds selling lemonade from somebody's house, well, not everybody's a resident in front of the house. It's okay that they have their friends helping them. So just some cleanup for administrative purposes within that section of the ordinance. So I hope that summarizes it. I will state, should we move this direction to create a new major home occupation C category, I have not yet included, we will then have to go into the different sections of our zoning districts and list that as a permitted use. So that would be a later date, or maybe as part of this when we come back, that we just simply state within the zoning districts whether that's permitted or conditional and make those adjustments as well. And with that,
is there anything about this that's controversial? Is there, I mean, it's just basically where to draw that line between stuff that's going to be administrative unless, or the commission, right?
Yeah, I think I feel pretty comfortable with it. And we see there are the occasional home business that brings up some controversy, and many of you have seen that over the years. And so I tried to take a very conservative approach to which ones are pulled away that I feel personally at least very comfortable with, that we just haven't been imposing conditions on. So you could massage that, and if you felt, yeah, well, you know, I don't think a single-chair beauty salon or esthetician really belongs here, we still want to see it. But there are probably others that we're not doing that much on with conditions. One thing I did add in here, I'm looking at Commissioner Sunloff, I think it was a comment that he or others had made as well, is even though we're taking it out of the Planning Commission's purview, at least the way this states, when somebody applies for a license, you know, if they meet all the requirements, it fits this category, as part of that licensure, we would then send out notification via mailers to adjacent property owners to let them know what's happening next door, essentially. So that, and I haven't come up with the exact language of that. I've been toying back and forth with, you know, we don't want to necessarily get the impression that you get a choice as whether this is happening. If they're meeting requirements, that's kind of the idea here, then it's going to happen. But you also, you know, I see a car every once in a while, I don't know these people, what's happening. Well, they've received notice in the mail that so-and-so does have permission from the city to conduct the business. So that was at least the idea on maybe how to get some of that noticing out and manage that aspect.
Essentially, you put them on notice that they can help you be enforcers of the code.
Sure.
That's kind of how I would look at it.
Deputize them.
Or, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so
So are you ready to have these recommended on live?
If the Planning Commission feels comfortable with it, I think it's something that could be forwarded and recommended. I necessarily reinvent the wheel of the restrictions on those businesses, so I'm comfortable with a lot of the language. I think the items of discussion, if you've had the chance to look at it, would be whether or not you're comfortable with the proposed businesses that you would no longer be seeing. So I'll just list those briefly. It's under 13. So a major home occupation C may include, but are not necessarily limited to, any use allowed as a minor home occupation, a single chair esthetician, beauty parlor, or barbershop, I put in here lessons for school tutoring and music lessons, not to exceed 4 students at a time. Dressmaking, daycare for 2 or less children, and massage therapy.
Those are,
Please.
those are things that will not come before.
That's what this is stating, correct. You would no longer see those specific businesses. So if I had a music lesson of 5 students, that triggers it will come back to the planning commission, but if it's a quartet, choir type deal, then that would not. It states, well, not all business types obviously are listed here. If they're listed elsewhere, that's where they belong, to accommodate that. And we've seen a couple small tutoring groups. It seems that they tend to do it in very small groups that have come here. They got siblings that they're teaching. That type of group perhaps could fit in this category where they're not coming back before you. So that's very subjective, and I'd be open to, if you feel like you want to modify or change or test of the bones, or probably in order.
My opinion is, actually, before I share that, my first question, and I might just need some help here because I'm not processing this very quickly. Why would you put in 13A, any use allowed as a minor home occupation? Doesn't that kind of like swallow the minor home occupation?
That's a great question. I mimicked some of the language, so from the major home occupation A and B.
Uh-huh.
So somebody might be, I don't know, if they fall within that category as, I want to pull up the OR.
Do you have a definition of a minor home occupation somewhere? Or?
Do, yes. So yeah, let me pull that up. So 1726 are home occupations. A minor home occupation, well, it doesn't have the definition type such as I created for major C, but typically what it is, and I'll give you a few examples because it does list some. So an artist or a sculptor, an author, composer, home craft, for sale off-site, office facility, of clergy, professional office facility, individual instrument instruction. So I suppose the idea is there could be an artist that while an artist is listed as a minor home occupation, perhaps they got shipments coming in and out or something that maybe is a little more impactful than what fits in that category. Minor home occupations are not required to be licensed based on statutory reasons, but they can volunteer for that. And the idea is they're not creating any additional impact that a typical residence would not. So you wouldn't, pretty much don't know these people exist. But again, perhaps an artist does create a little more impact. Maybe they fit more into the C category because of their trade and craft and how they do it. And therefore, we need to license them and need to put them under different restraints. That accurately, I think that's, anyway, that's my rationale behind it.
Makes sense. Yep. Sounds good to me. I think we've kicked around this idea enough that I think this makes sense for these things, and yeah.
I mean, it's still, it always leaves open the question, and this is just where we're at the state of the law, but it always leaves open the question of somebody, because when you're saying some general categories like that, and then you say such as, and you give some examples, somebody could come in and say, well, I want to do this, and I think that's like that. Yeah. And, the staff might say, well, we don't think it's like that. And they say, well, I think it's like that, and that a reasonable person could say, well, it could go either way. Then it goes to the property owner.
Which I'm comfortable with, and if they don't like staff's decision, as we've talked before, they can appeal to I think, is it the city council?
It'll go to you.
It comes to us.
Yeah.
And then we get to say, would a reasonable person think that thing is is in that same list? Then yes, great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Guess we better get more reasonable people.
It's the man who mows his lawn in his shirt sleeves. I think there's a Supreme Court case that says something like that.
Is that what they call it?
Tell me whatever that means. I don't know.
Okay, so do you have a motion? This is a motion to recommend or not recommend this to the city council?
It sounds like Lyle's ready for it. Now, I like the way it is. I like the way he's written it. So
Yeah.
I would recommend,
Me too.
or I would make the motion that we recommend to the city council that they adopt amendments to Chapter 1726 on creating home occupation C category and clarifying rules for certain types of businesses.
Do we need to
As
have
presented.
do we need to have a public hearing before we do this?
Yeah, you might as well formally open it and close it.
sorry.
No,
I
that
appreciate
was
that.
my bad.
That's, yeah. Okay.
So I'd like to open up the public hearing on this item. Is there anyone here that would like to address? Both shaking their heads. Okay. Sorry, Wilf. You
Okay, then
saved
I would
your
make that
moment.
motion I just
Ready for a
stated.
second.
I'll second that motion.
Wilf, I think it's you. Is it you?
Yeah, aye.
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 Yay.
Okay.
All right. Final item. Ordinance amending multiple sections of the Kaysville City ordinances, modifying the requirement for pressure irrigation east of US 89 and requiring communications conduit with new subdivision development.
Okay. I'll be very brief, and we have a gentleman here from Weber Basin that gives us our water, so just make note of that the commission would be and why we're considering it. But in short, there's some reasoning behind considering, or at least leaving it optional rather than mandatory, for the utilization of pressure irrigation east of Highway 89. So currently, all residential development is required to have a secondary pressure irrigation system, no matter where it's located and what the good or harm otherwise might be. So this leaves that open east of US 89. It still requires it everywhere else, where we don't think systematically or there are other feasible issues that would cause problem. And then second to that, there are multiple changes to different sections of the ordinance that are accomplishing that same thing. So that's why there's so many listed up here, but wherever it's addressed within the code. And then the final portion was as communication needs and internet services and such have changed over time, we want to ensure that as we're developing new subdivisions, there's conduit in place where those infrastructure systems could be installed. And so currently, as this is written, it just references our standards that conduit would be put in place in accordance with those. We will have to come back as we finalize that, those standards exactly, where that will demonstrate what that will look like. But probably a 4-inch tube in the ground that when communication providers are ready to put something in, it's ready to go. So they're not digging things back up. And
that's a subdivision anywhere?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, that conduit would be any subdivision in town. The pressure irrigation is applicable only east of 89.
You know, maybe what you're requiring is good, but I just heard a city engineer in a city down in the Salt Lake Valley say, we required that subdivisions, all developments put in conduit, and now we're wishing we had required them to put in 2 conduits or more conduits.
Oh.
Because there's, the technology's changing, there's more things going in, but maybe that's just because they had their initial conduit just wasn't that big, I don't know, but that may be something just to check out and see if there's a reason to have maybe 2 smaller conduits or just if one.
Yeah, and hopefully the way it's currently written, and let me double check because I think that's a fantastic comment, doesn't specify how many or what it looks like, but just says install the conduit in accordance with those standards. So certainly as we address those standards, I think that's a fantastic thing to take into consideration.
Yeah.
Let me make sure the language is flexible like that. Is based on your comment. If not, that'd be a great recommendation that we can ensure before we pass it to the council allows that flexibility.
It might be beneficial to look at the trades and see if they can pull different conduits. Thinking the only thing that they might have been saying about that is some things like fiber optics or something, when somebody's in there, won't let somebody else in the same conduit.
Or some different kind of technology.
Right, and they might interface with each other or something.
Yeah, that's what I was
So
wondering.
that's probably the reason why they're wishing they would have done 2, is not so much for conduit fill, but the way that, so it'd be.
The way they interact,
Yeah.
they might affect each other. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I wondered about that.
Yeah, and so what the proposal for that says is conduit for the purpose of housing telecommunications and internet infrastructure shall be installed in accordance with the Kaysville City standard drawing. So I think drawings are put together. We could put 2, 4, 6 different sizes of conduit in place.
Yeah. Okay.
And it would be in the right of way, right? So you'd have.
The right of way or easement, or
Correct.
the public utility easement.
Yeah. Either way, there'd be cities would have control over it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, is this a good time to have the public hearing? All right, we're going to open the public hearing. We're going to ask you to speak regardless, so I can close the public hearing and then have you come up,
Have
or you
to
can
say
do it
something.
part of the public hearing, whichever you want. Okay, I'll close the public hearing and then invite you to come up and make your case.
Weber Basin Water. I'm an assistant general manager with Weber Basin. Lyle just asked me to come and maybe answer any questions that you have, but I can just, first just say, our large aqueduct runs just east of 89 through that area of Kaysville. It starts in the Weber Canyon, runs from Weber Canyon. It's an 84-inch pipe out of Weber Canyon, runs down to North Salt Lake. It's on the east bench, runs all the way down to North Salt Lake. And North Salt Lake is a 21-inch pipe. Is essentially the backbone for all the water that's delivered along the Wasatch Front. So whether it's culinary or secondary, the bulk of the water comes from that pipeline. So that pipeline in that area of the open channel flow. So it's not under pressure typically. There's a lot of water that runs through there, but right in that location, it's mainly open channel. So there's not pressure necessarily in the pipe. So if you stuck a straw in that pipe on top, you wouldn't actually get water out of it. If you stuck it on the bottom, you're going to get water out of it. So the issue is that, as developments have tried to develop above the aqueduct, obviously that water has to be pumped, east towards the mountain. And so as far as Weber Basin is concerned, secondary water is really not designed to go way up on the mountainside as that. For an engineering standpoint, and then to water the properties kind of down below was kind of the idea. Our forefathers in the 50s didn't actually think folks would develop necessarily that high up on the mountain, or that people would desire to live there in the forest necessarily. But people do like to live there, as we found out. But we just don't think it's a positive step because of the pressure issues and the mechanical equipment necessary to pump water. Is it possible? Yes. It's additional water that's got to come out of the aqueduct, which is fine, but we want it at a consistent flow. We don't like developments to float off the aqueduct, and they want to pull water out of the aqueduct there. They put a reservoir there, and then they pump a constant volume out of a reservoir and not pump out of our aqueduct, because it just creates problems for us, when people are pumping up and down using the storage that's in the aqueduct for their individual development. And so we've been working with Fruit Heights City as well, and in this case, Kaysville City. And we just, as we've seen other developments struggle with secondary water above the aqueduct, we just don't think it's a positive step to continue to push secondary systems, a dual system in the streets when you've already got the culinary water system up there. And as we continue to develop, we're continually landscapes. We really don't want to see turf from fence line to fence line or back fence line to back of house. We really don't want to see those landscapes anymore that use a lot of water. We're trying to see more of a local scape type of landscape that uses trees, shrubs, gathering places for the families, and more of a water conservation minded landscape. And so with these landscapes that are more water conservation minded, even drinking water would be fine to deliver in those cases where you don't have to deliver a ton of water to outdoor landscapes. And so we're working with Fruit Heights City right now on a development that's really struggled for 2 years to try to put secondary water up on the east side of the, as a positive step to not require secondary water, because from an engineering standpoint, it's just difficult. So
Okay,
happy to answer any questions you might have. But
no, I think that makes sense. We're basically saying that we don't want to force, probably excuse the pun, pressurized water to go up the mountain. But the ordinance is currently constituted.
It's required.
Required that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think
Makes
makes
sense.
good sense.
And I will note that I've spoken with representatives from every one of our irrigation districts that's within Kaysville, so they are aware of the proposal and their specific concerns. We don't have a lot of land that's east of Highway 89. Most of what we do falls within Davis-Weber Canal's service district, and I don't know of any opposition from them as far as this. Again, it's still open for us, so if somebody wanted to do it, the way it's written, it's optional, but we're no longer mandating it, so it's case by case. Let's look at it, see if it makes sense or not.
Right, right.
Yeah, I think it makes good sense.
Agree.
I appreciate your time. Any other
Okay.
questions?
Oh, that makes sense.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Well, I
Thanks for
appreciated the Ogden Clinic discussion as well, so it was
Yeah.
very informative.
wading through all that, yeah.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Should we take a motion?
I'll make a motion that we recommend adopting an ordinance amending multiple sections of the Kaysville City ordinances, modifying the requirement for pressure irrigation east of US 89 and requiring communication conduit with new subdivision development.
Second.
Aye.
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 All righty. I think that takes us to favorite. Call to the public.
I was going to say,
Aw,
come on.
man. Sometimes I want you to, and other times.
Hey, I just want you to know, I appreciate that last move. I mean, I wish that Kaysville would have seen this 20 years ago and put conduits in.
Oh, yeah.
It would have made a huge difference. I mean, down the road, I mean, we're looking at fiber now in the city, but, and I don't know if it's feasible for us now or not, but having the infrastructure in is going to be big for us, and literally it'll save millions of dollars down the road. It's a small price for developers and contractors and homeowners to pay for the huge benefit down the road. So
Yeah,
anyway, I
and the
appreciate you doing
developers and those residents of those developments will appreciate it.
Oh, you bet they will.
Yeah,
And in fact, I know several in Layton that would like to go, but the cost to just run that even from the road to their house, where they have to break up cement or destroy landscaping and everything, that's a big thing.
Yeah.
So this is great. Appreciate it.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, call to the public is now closed. Reports, correspondence calendar.
Yeah, just a couple brief things. So, meeting scheduled, and in light of some of the conversation that was had tonight, we were awarded some money from the Wasatch Front Regional Council for a general plan update. So we have a strategic plan that we're already underway with, which there'll be some overlap and some similarities in them, but I think we got, I'm going to get the number wrong, but some $60,000 to help us with the general plan effort to make those updates. So when you talk about a future land use map or more clarity or direction, that's something that we get to look forward to now, and we got some resources to help us do it. So I think besides that, unless the commission has other to announce.
The future land use map would make these rezone things go so much easier for us and the city council.
Yeah, and
because
given the amount of land that there's left in undeveloped in Kaysville,
Not gonna be that
probably wouldn't
hard,
hurt to do it.
because, I mean,
Not a $60,000 map, maybe.
essentially you answer all the questions of what we want where before it comes, and then it's kind of harsh, but then you say, look, we've already answered these questions, everybody.
And were you here when
And were
they
you,
had
and the answer to that will probably be no.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, but and then there's still some legislative decisions, of course. In every instance, you would still have to.
Yeah.
We've planned, and that's the whole point, right? And so.
But yeah, and like I said, I mean, what have we got, Lyle? 200, 400 acres of undeveloped land left in Kaysville, and that's about it.
More than that, but not a ton more.
Not a lot more, and we can plan that.
We just got to get it right so it doesn't come back to say, well, you said here. It's
Yeah.
Good. All right. Well, then our most favorite motion of all.
I won't be here next meeting. I'll be at the League of Cities and Towns.
So just say, for the record, Wilf is disappointed that our code is not more specific for next meeting. Okay, you're covered.
That's right.
Okay. All right.